Hello, and welcome to this week's Midweek Meditation. Well, in the last week, for about the first time in months, another story has taken the place of COVID-19 at the top of the news. But it hasn't been better news, far from it. The killing of George Floyd in Minnesota was appalling, and the shockwaves have not only engulfed the USA, but have spread to this country as well. There's a real sense, not just of racism and injustice, but of anxiety and insecurity. Add to that the appalling scenes of crowds flocking to beaches in this country last weekend, with no regard at all to whether it would reignite the spread of COVID-19, which has also fueled that sense of anxiety and insecurity for many people. With all that going on, I'd have to agree with the commentator who years ago said that anyone who thinks this world is basically okay needs to have their TV set examined. So how do you respond? When the world seems increasingly insecure, where do you turn? Let me read Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then will I be confident. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord, and to seek him in his temple. For in the day of trouble he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent, and set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At his sacred tent I will sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice when I call, Lord. Be merciful to me and answer me. My heart says of you, seek his face. Your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, God my Saviour. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Do not hand me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, sprouting malicious accusations. I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. I guess taken literally, it might sound remote even from our experience today. Evil men advancing against you to devour your flesh, an army besieging you. Thank God that isn't the experience of most of us, not literally anyway. But in another way, perhaps it isn't a bad description of life today. Maybe it has literally felt a bit like that in the USA in this last week. But even though we might not face literal enemies, we know at the moment that doesn't mean that our lives are free from threat. In the face of COVID-19, how many people today could claim to have a life that is perfectly secure? Not many, I don't think. And maybe you do feel a bit like David did, as though you are under siege and unable to do anything to save yourself. And even if you aren't facing any of those situations, the enemy might be inside you. Fighting against alcohol or gambling or pornography, that can seem like enemies and foes attacking. True, we might not be facing a physical army, but for many people today, what David describes here is their life. So what can we do? What did David do? In Psalm 55, where David seems to be in a similar position, he says, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert." And I guess that is one response to trouble, to try to run away. But of course it doesn't work. You might be able to run away from enemy soldiers, but you can't run away from your fears and addictions. So here in Psalm 27, David does something much better. Instead of running away, he runs towards the Lord. That's where security is found. One thing I ask of the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. When David says that he wants to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of his life, it might mean that he wished he could literally live in the tabernacle, the tent in which was kept the Ark of the Covenant, which represented God's presence with his people. But I'm not sure that's what he meant. I think that what David says in these verses is to do with living in God's presence, knowing that the Lord was with him. And David knew that God wasn't restricted to the temple or the tabernacle. So it's as though David says, one thing I ask, this is what I seek, that I may live in your presence, Lord. That I might know that you're with me. That I might look to you and meditate on your glory and your beauty wherever I am. Because when my heart is set on you, then nothing will be able to get to me. As Isaiah says in chapter 26, verse 3, you will keep in perfect peace the one whose mind is steadfast because they trust in you. And that's where these words apply to us as well. Maybe at the moment you are feeling, where can I run to? And that's made harder because we can't meet together in church. That vital opportunity, week by week, to meet together and be renewed and refreshed for our life in the world. It's been taken away from us. But that doesn't mean that we can't meet with the Lord, that we can't live in his presence. Whatever is going on around you, you can turn to his word and meet him there. You can turn to him in prayer at any time and in any place during the day. In that sense, you can dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life. It would be nice if that was all there was to say, but it isn't. There is still another section to Psalm 27, and I think it almost catches you off balance. We've just had this great statement of confidence in God in the first 3 verses, then the security of living in God's presence in the next 3 verses. But then it all seems to go pear-shaped. Hear my voice when I call. Do not hide your face from me. Do not hand me over to the desire of my foes. It's such a change of tone that some commentators think that this wasn't originally 1 psalm but 2. But maybe that just tells us something about academics, because any Christian who lives in the real world will know that having God with you doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to be plain sailing. And the security that the first half of this psalm talks about is not the security that comes from knowing that all your problems are far away. It's a security that gives you an anchor in a storm. The things that David prays for in this last section are the things that he can only pray for because he trusts the Lord, because he is gazing on the beauty of the Lord, because his feet are on a rock. And that is just what the first half of this psalm gives, somewhere solid to stand. And when you are standing there, you can ask the Lord to help you. You can ask him to keep close to you. You can ask him to guide you. You can ask him to protect you from your enemies, whether those enemies are literal or in your circumstances or inside you. It's only because you know that the Lord is your light and your salvation, and because you have spent time gazing on his beauty, that you can ask these things of him. And you can do it with confidence. I'm confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. The storms of life will never be God's last word. And of course for us, living after Jesus, our hope can be much greater. Because for us, the land of the living extends beyond this life. We can look forward to that day when Jesus returns, to the new heaven and the new earth, when there will be no more death or mourning or crying or racial injustice or COVID-19 or pain and we can know that if we have put our trust in Jesus, he will keep us till that day. And so we can wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord.